All right, third day of the 5MX Sales Summit. So great to have everybody. We've got people viewing the event on YouTube today. So if you want to ask a question, make sure you're logged into your YouTube account, and I'll make sure those questions get addressed. We have a great lineup today of speakers from Slice, BZ, Career Minds, and BombBomb. So I'm personally excited, and I know you are too. In a moment, we'll have our speakers give a quick introduction on who they are and what they do, and something interesting about themselves so that our audience can get to know you a bit more. And the topic today really is pretty simple. It's finishing 2021 strong. We've had such a long 16 months, right? And we're not completely out of this pandemic yet. So, interested to hear what pivots you've made and are making to, again, hit those numbers or exceed those numbers by the end of the year. So we'll kind of get right into it. Why don't we go around the horn here? Katie, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so I'm Katie Lawrence. I'm the SVP of Global Sales at Career Minds. Excuse me. I am based in the Ocean City, New Jersey area, which is just due east from Philadelphia. Go Eagles. And let's see, fun fact, I have 3 dogs. I was one of the people who got a pandemic dog, and I had a short memory, and but he's great, and that's love my pups. They're my little coworkers here because we've always been remote.
So awesome. Thank you, Katie. Dale.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Sure.
Dale Zawinski. I am the VP of Sales at BZ. We're based out of Barcelona, and we are an employee engagement platform. So we sit on top of Microsoft and SharePoint. Fun fact about me, I've now done 7 startup companies in 4 different countries. So wow, I've enjoyed the international work.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dale. Sharm.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Hi, I'm Sharm Shade. I'm the Director of Sales for our U.S. division at Slice. It's been almost 2 years I've been with Slice. We are local authentic pizza. So if you're looking for that, definitely download the app. And I would say I'll keep the fun facts. I'm on a quest for the best beach in the world. Probably been to about 13 countries so far to see. So if you have suggestions, let me know.
That's awesome. Thanks, Sharm. Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. So I'm Dan Hawkins. I am the Director of Sales here at BombBomb. We are a video messaging platform. And a fun fact about me, I would say recently a new father. So my wife and I had a son. He's about to turn 10 months old. So getting to learn the joys of being a first-time father, and especially throughout COVID and now kind of coming out of COVID and getting him socialized has been really, really fun for my wife and I.
That'll change your life, Dan, for sure.
Yeah, I would say so, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks everyone for the background. Let me start it off, just kind of asking from each of you, and again, come aboard, don't be shy, let me know. How has the pandemic affected your sales teams, your business? And then we'll talk about, the next 5 months as well. But let's start there. Tell me how things have changed since the pandemic.
I think for me in the pandemic, I actually switched jobs at the end of the pandemic. But I think what's happening is because everything is so remote. I mean, as sales organizations, have always been remote, although now it's just being more accepted globally. So I think there's been a lot of movement happening, and I think it's actually really, really difficult today to find good talent, and talent's getting swiped from underneath you. So I think the biggest challenge right now is really hiring and ramping for any kind of growth that you're going through.
So what you're saying in some ways, Dale, it's very much a candidate's market right now.
It
almost
is.
driven a lot by the pandemic in a lot of ways.
I think so.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I was thinking through as, like a tip, if you will, for the rest of the year is just build a bench, right? So you have to have a bench of staff because it is an employee's market and they are being heavily recruited right now. So definitely want to have your bench ready to go so you don't have those gaps leading into some of the most aggressive targets of the year. But one of the ways that COVID has impacted our business, it actually has accelerated growth, I would say, just because we are an online ordering platform and there was a lot of hesitancy of going out and dine-in was closed. So, for our shops, a lot of the pizzerias that we were attempting to close and work with, they were a little reluctant to change prior to COVID, but, kind of being pushed or encouraged into it, we were able to handhold them through a process where we still have their best interests at heart, as opposed to some of the other third parties. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, for us here at BombBomb, I think it was similar. I think, like many other companies, it was just one day we were kind of monitoring what was going on. What are we going to do as a leadership team? And then just, one day we're like, all right, we're pulling the plug. Everyone's working remote. And fortunately, we were, blessed with the technology. We equipped our teams with everything that they needed to be able to work from home like right away. And that was unique to us because we're a smaller company out of Colorado Springs, and everyone came in all the time. We had very few people working remote. But one of the things that we did see, and we're very aware of how we talk about this, but it did provide a spotlight on us as a service. But we are very aware that this affected everyone in the world, and there's hundreds of millions of people that are affected, obviously lives lost. And so we're hesitant to talk about it and framing it as a good thing for our company, but it did allow us to help a lot of individuals when they couldn't get face to face, when they needed to interact, with that human aspect. So we've seen that.
So accessibility was already really in place, and it was just, helping people with that next step, just to take it and act. That's awesome. What about you, Katie?
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue for what I do. I didn't mention what I do, but I do outplacement. It's an HR technology platform. And if you've never heard of outplacement, that's a good thing. But what we do is if a company lays somebody off, they'll give us our service to help them find their next job. And we have a lot of differentiators. We're a disruptor. It's a very traditional service where people had to go face to face, and we've brought it all online. And so globally, things were still very traditional ahead of the pandemic. And so one of the things we really had a very strong year last year, and all of our employees were already remote. So that really enabled us to have zero disruption internally for our sales and corporate staff, but then also for the clients and participants who we service. So they were able to continue business as usual because there was already so much other disruption going on. So that really enabled us to scale. And then globally as well, and even continuing now, companies that did things traditionally, they're looking for what we have, which is something virtual, so that we can meet the needs, consistently delivered service, no matter where people are. So it was, probably similar to Sharm and Dan, a pretty good year, and hesitant to talk about it in that context because of who we work with, but it really set us up to for people to need the service that we have.
That's so awesome. And I would love to explore that, how you transformed to digital from more of a traditional face-to-face selling situation. But let me kind of start with kind of the next 5 months, right? So it's hard to believe we only got 5 months left here in the year. What strategies are you, utilizing and executing upon to finish the year strong? Anyone's welcome to start on that.
I can jump in. So I think one of the things that I'm looking at and have always around this time, which has really proved to be useful, is just looking at the annual budget and developing that gap plan. Really just kind of narrowing down, the traditionally in sales, the end of the year kind of spikes, right? You kind of have that check mark. And obviously with the growth from last year, year over year growth is going to be even that much more aggressive. So really just looking at what are our annual goals, what are our annual targets, and kind of narrowing down what is that gap plan and what is the pipeline that we need to establish to be able to execute and overachieve on those goals. So that's typically something around the August-ish timeframe that I would typically do anyway. But that is one tip I could say at this point.
And I think just finishing strong is an interesting term, right? Because we're in a place where we've been fairly successful like everybody else, and you don't really like to say it, but I think in general we got to get away from so many negative things. Like we got to start getting some positivity and some things that are actually good that are happening out there. And for me, part of it is like doing the same thing consistently all the time. Like if we just start now and then we're going to say, okay, we're going to like really drive hard, that's fine, but that should be the way we do it from day one. So I always just talk about consistency, doing fundamentals and basics, sending recap letters, following up with customers, having conversations. And I like to roll 2 quarters ahead. So I'm looking right now, what I'm doing from a leadership perspective is looking in 2022. And because we're a SaaS organization, SaaS company, the faster we can get deals closed in 2022 and drive that revenue, the better off we're going to be. So obviously we'll see anything that we can pull in. So we use technology to see, are there deals that we can pull in? What are those deals? What can we do to help initiate those deals? I believe time kills all deals. So we want to try to accelerate anything that we can in, but stay consistent. I think too many people are trying to do things that are unnatural. So if you do unnatural sales motions, like one, you just kill your credibility, but two, this is a long-term game. So.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, Dale. You said unnatural sales motions. I think that's a really interesting phrase. Could you expand upon that? What do you mean by that, and how does that look from?
I just think
around reality.
We talk about a lot of discounts. I mean, I used to work at Oracle, so I've worked at really big organizations as well. And when you do things like, hey, we're going to drop our price by 70%, or, we want to bring you into the end of the quarter. Like, we've trained a lot of buyers how to buy our software. And so if you train them to buy software at the end of a quarter, at the end of a year, those unnatural selling motions, like, just cause heartache across the entire year. They're really hard to scale businesses. So I think it's unnatural discounting. It's discounting just to bring things at the end of the quarter. I understand there are things that you have to do, but just be careful that you're not overselling the things that should be just natural in a sales process. So
in some ways that makes you, the salesperson, look somewhat desperate, right? I mean, and customers get turned off by that to a certain extent. Who else wants to chime in on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I was going to say is do the basic things really, really well. And that includes setting goals, like Sharm said, asking for the business, that type of thing. One of the things in HR technology, and probably a lot of other SaaS things, but HR people like to have things start Jan 1. And so sometimes you are forced into these situations where you are cramming everything in at the end of the year. I mean, unfortunately, I've been the person on the day before Christmas, late at night with my boss, trying to get this deal in so that it counts for the year and they can get implemented Jan 1. And so sometimes too, depending on the system, that could need a signature now in September, but early on. So over communicate, get in with enablement, your deal desk, contracting, the implementation, find out what exactly needs to happen so you can get these deals in. And then also with your client or your prospect, what's that timeline look like? And this is kind of a basic thing too, but if they really need to go and start Jan 1, what we do is a very contract-driven business. And if they need to have that in, then what needs to happen and work backwards from that? When do they need to sign? When do we need to have things through contracting? Sometimes it can take 5 minutes in what I do. Sometimes it can take 5 months. So what does their legal look like? Is there technical due diligence? Find out all of these things ahead of time, because then, that night before Christmas may not be great. And it's the worst thing about sales, having to cram everything in at the end of the year. But if you can communicate with everyone and become, besties with your boss so that they can go to bat internally for you, get that timeline in place, agree upon it, and make sure everything's out on the table. And that includes doing everything really well and back to basics up until that point.
So one of the things I heard was engaging all the right people sooner rather than later, because, you get down the road, oh, I should have talked to so-and-so over in procurement. Yeah. That's what's holding things up. And that just extends sales cycles. So we don't want that for sure. What about you, Dan? What do you think?
I thought that was so good, Katie. I think, when you look at that timeline, when you're, working backwards at that, I think that's great. I think we have to be looking for those moments that matter, right? And I think addressing those and being very clear on what is a moment that matters. What do we define it as? What comes before? So what's your entry criteria? What's your exit criteria? And again, knowing your timeline. But I would triple down on, Dale, what you mentioned, Katie, what you mentioned. Anytime we're looking at, improving results, right, seeing something tangible, we've got to get back to the basics. And so I think where we've spent a lot of time is really just, an overall assessment, again, of like, where are we at as an organization? Where are our team members at? What things, maybe behaviors changed over the course of the last year or so? to the point where maybe we just had to sell that, but maybe it's not necessarily what we want to continue to do. And so, for us, it's all about a playbook that we've centered everything around. It's about personas. And so again, kind of doing an overall assessment, seeing where everyone's at, and then where do we need to be spending time as a leadership team, as a coach, right, in order to make sure that we're doing things the right way, in the right order, not skipping steps, not getting ahead of ourselves, things of that nature.
So it's clear. I mean, it's clear if we abandon all the basics, we're in trouble. I mean, hey, we just had a pandemic. Doesn't mean we throw everything out in the trash, right? All in the garbage. Let's do something completely different. No, you still have to do the basics. But I wonder, are there any nuances within your sales process or sales tactics that had to change due to the pandemic? I mean, not everything's honky-dory, right? Some of our customers were actually suffering. How did we go from more traditional ways of selling to kind of completely digital and remote selling? So help me understand that a bit more. What actually needed to change specifically so we can help our audience understand?
Yeah, I'll just quickly offer. I think we saw it a lot, and it's leading with empathy and knowing that, a lot of businesses got turned upside down, right? A lot of people were, now in situations where they couldn't do their job as effective, and they're kind of sorting out what is the best approach for that. And so I think just a lot of the sales community, a lot of the stuff that I would see on LinkedIn, a lot of the other sales leaders that I would talk to, I think everyone did a really good job of understanding that we can't just go in with our typical pitch, right? We need to understand there's humans behind this. Everyone's been affected. And so leading with empathy, I think, is certainly something that we saw. But also, there's still a business that needs to happen. There's still a need for your product. And maybe that has changed a little bit, but ultimately, what is the problem that you solve, right? Do you still solve it for them in kind of their new normal as they're going through this? And if so, how do you message that? How do you communicate that, right? And how do you ultimately help them achieve a positive outcome for their business, right? Or whatever, outcome they're looking for.
That's great, Dan. I mean, you mentioned empathy. We hear a lot about empathy, but what does that actually mean in your sales organizations today? I have an idea of what it means to me, but how does that look in terms of practical tips?
Great question. I think it's genuine, it's authentic, it's the human aspect of it for us, right? It's not just the kind of superficial, hey, let me build some rapport, let me talk about, hey, how are you doing? How's your family doing? So I think I'm lucky to be at an organization where our founders, our leadership team has built our company around one common goal, and that's building relationships, true, authentic relationships. And so I feel like, we surround ourselves with those type of people that really grasp to that. And so it's easier for me to coach empathy because I think most people understand that that's a core function of what we do. But I think, to your point there, there's lots of things, right, that maybe show up as empathy, or we think it is, but maybe not as true empathy. And I think it truly comes down to you addressing your peers, your prospects, anyone you interact with as a human being, right, and understanding that they have intrinsic value, right, and that we want to be adding value to them. Every interaction that we want to have, we want to be adding to.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dan.
I think it also comes into play too, Dan, with leading leaders, just in the sense of being able to understand that our sales managers and the people that report to us and show up every day are also experiencing a world change, right? And so how do we support our team members? How do we support our staff to make sure that they feel like we care about their whole person and their whole being, as opposed to just the job that they do or just, coming to work that day? So I definitely feel like that showed up in, leading the leaders amongst my teams as well. And to the other question about just how the business has functionally changed, we actually, in the middle of COVID last year, began to offer delivery as one of the options for our service that we didn't previously offer. So we literally added a product line for our customers because we understood that that was a need that we didn't have available, but it was definitely something that our customers needed. So we wanted to make sure that we were full service. So that was one of the things that we were able to add and functionally change the business. And I don't know if we lost Andrew there.
You just said keep talking. So I'll take the next one. Functionally, here's what I think has happened. There's a couple of things. One is I think that a lot of salespeople and sales leaders got exposed. I think a lot of people that weren't doing work or kind of not figuring out how to change up their sales process. I believe sales is changing so rapidly, like every 6 months, every 12 months, things are changing so quickly. The pandemic just created another part of that change. And in that change, it just exposed people that really were not either good salespeople or good sales leaders. And I think functionally you had to figure out different ways to make connections because you weren't going to shows, you weren't going to events, like everything ended up going online, and you saw people struggle with that. So one of the things that I did was I started joining a bunch of micro communities, sales micro communities. I told my teams to be joining sales micro communities just to expand your network. So there was a lot of them that grew up out of the pandemic. Product community like Rev Genius, like it started with like 5 people. I remember talking to Jared when it was really young, and now they're over 16,000 people. And I think when things happen like this and you functionally have to change, it's not just at the process level, it's actually at many different levels. And how are you going to engage with different people? How can you build a bigger network because you aren't going to shows or you're not going to events? And I heard this from like so many salespeople, like, well, I can't do this because we're not going to events, or, oh, I can't do that because I can't go see the customer. It's like, well, your life has to continue. So what are you going to do to figure it out? So I think it's more internally exposing people that don't know how to change with time.
Yeah, it's such a great point, Dale. I mean, in sales, we have to grow, we have to evolve, right? We have to adjust to our circumstances. And, the pandemic was completely out of our control. And so, it's all on how you react to that event and continue to evolve and grow as a salesperson. Anyone else want to chime in on that particular topic?
Regarding one thing that we saw was everybody was home and no one was picking up their phone. So just like what you were saying, Dale, as my salespeople were like, what are we going to do? Because this is a real challenge. But we have LinkedIn, obviously we have email. So how are we going to add value in these other types of ways? Because I hate when somebody connects with me on LinkedIn and automatically wants to sell me something. And I know I'm not alone on that, but it never ends. And so, I believe in using LinkedIn to build value in our interactions there, posting online, and then maybe have you built enough clout to ask for something from that person. So, how can we do that and maybe find other ways to get in touch with people? And then from the empathy perspective, just doing what we do every day, we are dealing with people on the worst days of their lives at Career Minds. And we're selling something that's a really kind of odd thing. And we were extremely busy. So it was kind of taking a toll on everyone in Career Minds. And Charm, I agree exactly with what you said. The leaders need to lead and manage through that change. And that's where you really look to them for, how do we navigate this? How can we be empathetic in dealing with these very delicate situations all around? It really is up to the leaders. And there were some challenges. There was a lot going on last year. And we had some rumbles, as Brene Brown likes to say. And I think we did a really, really good job coming out of that and making the changes that were needed internally to live our values and drive our mission, while reminding ourselves that these are people that work for us and people that we're working with every day, like I said, on their worst days of their lives. So how can we really be that company that we say that we are, which is my goal. I'm very, very big on doing what we say that we're doing for everybody that we work with.
That's such great points, Katie. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, as Dan was saying on empathy and Katie was saying on empathy, it's interesting because it starts really from the leadership, because empathy actually comes down from the top. And like, if the leaders are like pushing, no, you got to hit your numbers. No, you got to hit your targets. No, you got to do this. Instead of being like, you know what, you need a break. Why don't you go play golf? Why don't you go to the spot, like do something that you enjoy doing and get out of, like, interrupt the pattern. And I think too many leaders don't remember that. And so how can we expect the salespeople to show empathy if as leaders we're not showing empathy? And I think that's once again, coming back to the exposure piece, like there's just a lot of people that don't know how to lead properly. So you're getting a lot of that exposure happening.
Yeah, I think empathy needs to be shown across the board, right? If my leaders and my manager aren't showing empathy, why would I go out and show empathy to my customers? That just seems like a disconnect. But I don't want to beat a horse here, but LinkedIn is probably one of the best tools for salespeople today. Yet they continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over. Katie, you get them. Everybody here gets these messages. Connect with me without any personalization. Then the next message you get is, I want to sell you something. So how can sales people, sales leaders, really look at LinkedIn and say, here's kind of a process of how we're going to use it as a sales organization. And I'm sure a lot of your salespeople are already using it. Most people are using it incorrectly. So how do you show them the way of how it can be such a great tool?
Lead by example, man. Just lead by example. Like if you're doing stupid stuff like that, they're going to do stupid stuff like that. Lead by example, show like what I tell. We just went through some LinkedIn Navigator training. So we got them some training. And what I said to them very frankly, especially with the LinkedIn Navigator trainer on, is you still need to earn the right to have the conversation. Like it's just like a phone call or an email or going to an event. Like you got to earn the right. And the right way to do LinkedIn is to find your prospects and see if they're on LinkedIn and engage in their content or engage in the content of their company or, like and engage. And the challenge with LinkedIn or the challenge with any social network like that is it's a long tail strategy and we're all short-term mentality. So once again, we can blame the salespeople, but you got to start looking at the leadership. Like it starts at the top. Like if you're nailing, hey, you got to do X number of pieces of activity or whatever it is, they're doing stupid stuff like what you're seeing instead of like, hey, I know, like, what's the strategy? Are you getting movement in the pipeline? Like I'd much rather see velocity happening in movement than just activity. And if I got to get to understanding what you're doing for activity, you're not going to enjoy me because I don't want to do it as much as you don't want me to do it.
I don't want you to do it, Dale. I really don't.
I mean, I agree with that. And for what we're doing, it's really persona based because we are selling into large enterprise organizations, and at very different levels, they have different buying criteria essentially. So how can we match that with something meaningful? I mean, it's tough to think about what's going to be meaningful and earth shattering to the CHRO who's leading, global people strategy and who is a thought leader in this space themselves. So I don't want people to be overwhelmed by that. So we've worked with our marketing team to help us come up with ideas and content. And so if the salespeople don't, listen, I'm a perfectionist. One of the hardest things for me to do is to find, I have articles and tabs that I want to put on LinkedIn, but what am I going to say that's new, right? And I hope I'm not alone there because that's a little private thing. But, I want to share something that's important. But what can I say that's different? And I think that can be really, really tough for salespeople. And so if you can get the support of marketing, even if I find something, I share it with them and a couple of tidbits that they can share. It's a team effort. I definitely think so. So if I'm getting that feedback, I'm talking to marketing, I'm talking to whoever can pull the lever and get us a survey, get us a new blog, get us a new piece of information, and sharing it with some talking points so that they can make it their own, but they don't have to recreate the wheel.
So powerful, Kate. I think, data, just sharing data or information is not enough, right? We have to have a stand, like, what's our opinion that is different, that is valuable to our clients. So for salespeople, very, very difficult. I almost think that we have to grow our creative muscles a bit more in sales. And that's not something salespeople traditionally have done. So,
or Katie, one of the things that you can do, because this gets on my mind a little bit, like what is new that I'm going to share. So there's two things I think about. One is I just do whatever's on the top of my mind that day or what happened yesterday or whatever it is, like that's what I post. Like I post every day and whatever's happening or something that I've learned or something that I'm trying to get information from the community on, like be genuine about it. But then the other thing is you say you tab a bunch of articles. So many people don't have time because they're swiping through Instagram, they're going through Facebook. Like pick out 3 or 4 things or 2 things that you learn from the article that would be really interesting for someone just to see at a glance. and say, here's the article, but this is what I learned from it. And you don't have to create anything new. Like, it's already there.
That's true. Good tip, Dale. Thank you.
I think that's great, Dale. One of the things we try to coach on is like, yes, adding value, making deposits, right? Giving them something that is persona based, that's specific to them, to their organization. But that cheat, right? We call it our reward, but it is not like, hey, here's a white paper that's perfect for you, for your role, for your industry. Well, chances are they could search for that white paper if they wanted to read a white paper, right? So what's going to get them to read the white paper? I think, Dale, what you mentioned, it's like, check out this specific section, right? This paragraph, right? Here's the insight that I took, or others like you in your roles are getting from this. And I think that just, again, shows that it's like, you're willing to help them, right? You're making deposits, right? So eventually when it comes to the ask, right, the withdraw, there's enough in the bank for them to say, yes, okay, let's take a few minutes and chat, right?
Yeah, it's almost salespeople get a little bit lazy. Hey, I want to share this article with you, but what about the article? Right? So do the extra work. Sometimes that means slowing down to provide more quality to the prospect or customer that we're talking to. What about you, Sharon?
A little lazy.
Yeah,
People get really lazy.
Are you talking about me, Dale? No, kidding.
And I think that, fair to say, for sure, there's probably some people that are lazy salespeople, try to go the path of least resistance, if you will. But again, that's a leadership and coaching opportunity from us, right? Because that is what happens in our one-on-one. How do we help to coach you to say, like, this is okay, but this is what we could do to be better? Because good is the enemy of great, right? So you can be good at your metrics, but that doesn't mean you're actually making progress. It doesn't mean you're actually filling the funnel with actionable sales. So I think you just have to kind of continue to work that muscle, because it is a muscle. It's something that doesn't come naturally, because we're very much so metrics based. And so they say, oh, we're doing a good job because we're hitting our metrics. But no, how is your retention? What's your churn rate? Like, are you maximizing the opportunity? Are we getting the meetings with the right people? Do we have their full attention? Are they actually interested, or just trying to get you to stop calling?
Yeah.
I'll give something super tactical to the audience. So I either learned this a long time ago. When you start doing some LinkedIn, or it's even in emails, it's called 3x3. Take 3 minutes to find 3 facts out about somebody and use those in the email, LinkedIn conversation. And it doesn't waste a ton of time, because we all go down the rabbit hole if you start going into that process. But, set yourself time. Let's say you have 10 prospects, find 3 facts out. And if you can't find out about the people, about the organization or something like that, and utilize that in your communication, and you'll be much more successful in your reply rates. Like, I wouldn't talk about your open rates. Your open rates just mean you have a good subject line. Let's talk about, your reply rates.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with LinkedIn is, again, what we already talked about with Katie, people, just sending you, pushy sales messages. I think it's really taking an interest in them first. And then, you can, as Dan said, really fill up the bank so you can withdraw. I think that's so key. But what if someone's not active on LinkedIn? I mean, and that's possible. We always think that LinkedIn sometimes is the end all be all. It's really not, right? So there's lots of people and prospects that aren't active on LinkedIn. Yep. What are some of the other ways that we can reach people at this moment in time that seems to be pretty effective?
Lumpy mail. I always call it lumpy mail. Just straight up sending them something in the mail. Like, how many times, and it could be a little tricky depending on where they're at, but or where they're getting mail. But most of the people just get bills and other stuff in the mail. You get like something that's really creative, or something you'd be much more willing to open it. And then the side effect of that is you feel kind of like obligated to take a phone call from them. So that's the second part of it.
So a large majority of my team is actually an in-market team. And so as you can imagine, with COVID, that actually had to, impact the way we went about doing business as well, when traditionally we would just go and drop in. But I do think there's something to be said for just that face-to-face contact if they are in the office, or if it is an SMB business or a different size business that is a little bit more hands-on or granular level. Because you can also you can read the room a little better than you can over the phone or in an email, right? So you can see, are they progressive? Are they traditional? Do they have technology? Do they have an old rotary phone? Like, there's just elements in the room that you can read. Do they have a Yankees poster in the back of the store? You can kind of read the room a little bit better. So I always feel like that is definitely still a very strong and high propensity to close opportunity when you do have that in-market team or those regional teams. So definitely still execute against that. I mean, it's worked really well for us. And one thing I would add to that is, in doing so, it's really important to work with your data teams, right? Because you want to be efficient. You don't want to just drive all over the place, hitting random leads that are not, highest propensity to close or highest value for the business. So you want to prioritize so you can maximize the time of that rep, but also that you have that strategy in place. Once you do get to that person, you have the idea of what to say. So
Charmin, in your case, I mean, your people are actually going out to, owners, operators, heads of pizza shops, right? So you rely on that model. I assume the pandemic had some impact on that to a certain extent. So, although I think pizza shops are pretty quick to offer some solutions to get your pizza at a window or something. So help me understand how that was impacted and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, all throughout the pandemic, we definitely were still out with our PPE and still going, door to door. We were committed to make sure that it was successful, but at the same time, it really forced us to be efficient. So whereas we may have previously hit 15 stops in a day, maybe we only get to 7 or 8 that are actually open. But those 7 or 8 need to be the best of the best. They need to be the influencers. They need to be able to refer 5 other shops to us. So we're really making that investment in time of going to see them, bringing value to them. Having done our pre-call research, like you said, Dale, with the 3 facts in 3 minutes, it was definitely along those lines of how can we really truly help this business so that they can become an advocate for us. But a lot of these shops were still active. They were still in business. These are family-owned businesses. A lot of times it's their livelihood, so they couldn't afford to close. And so again, going in, wanting to help them, truly being that hand-holding through this process. We were forced to just kind of get out there and get in the trenches with them.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Sharon.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question from the audience. I'm going to read this verbatim. Whoever wants to dive in, I'd appreciate it. How do you coach non-creative salespeople to get creative in their outreach? What resources or direct advice do you provide them?
So I'll start. Usually when this is super typical if you are starting this process. One is I like to get it creative, so I just roll up my sleeves and we'll just start going through the process. So hopefully your leader is a little bit creative and you can kind of get into some of that. If that's not something that you really like to do, there's a couple things. One is you can go to a lot of these micro communities and they have ideas all the time. Like so many ideas. It's kind of crazy. In fact, one of the micro communities I joined was a marketing micro community, just so I could learn more marketing side and skills. Or go to your marketing department, collaborate with your marketing department. They write great content all the time. You may have to tweak it up a little bit because it may get a little bit too soft, but your marketing department, this is what they do for a living. So I would collaborate with the marketing department.
My follow-up on the creative question there, I think, I think it's, giving them some ideas, maybe. So sitting down with them, brainstorming, right, and kind of structuring out, okay, like, would it be good if we tried something like this, right? Are you more comfortable with this? And really creating it with them, right? Obviously, we could say like, hey, here's what you should try. But I think if you do it with their involvement, so you get that buy-in, and then it's obviously going to be much more impactful from there. I also personally believe, though, creativity is so crucial, right? It's important, right? What worked yesterday doesn't necessarily work tomorrow. So we have to be adaptable. We have to be molding. But I think there's always a spectrum, right? And I know I've seen it where you get individuals that are like so creative. They're always wanting to change and adapt, and they're not ultimately falling back on the basics, again, the fundamentals, the things that got them success in the first place. So I think sometimes, again, it's a matter of like taking the creative minds, creating some structure around it just to make sure that we're always aligned in the right direction, and then kind of bringing up some of the people that are late adapters that just don't have the mind for that, right? And utilizing some of the things that we heard from the people that are really, creative and seeing success, and then again, like, getting buy-in at their level and saying, let's test this out, and then go.
Yeah, I think buy-in is so crucial, Dan. I mean, I think if someone does it for them, they don't really have that ownership, right? So make it your own. And I think your point about creative people in general. It's just so spot on. They're always, trying to come up with the next best thing. Sometimes we can get too cute and not serve our, primary purpose in our sales organization. So such a great point.
There's just so many resources out there too. I mean, a lot of creativity is imitation, right? Like, so do some Google searches on like how to get in the door at this industry or top tips for this vertical. And maybe that'll spark some ideas. I don't think everyone has to be so far outside the box that you have to fly an airplane over the beach to try to get someone's attention. But I think there's definitely like a couple of tools out there and blog posts or different industry thought leaders that you could just do a few Google searches and get something to spark your ideas.
I haven't done the airplane thing yet, Sharon, but I might try that. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question from the audience again. They love the idea of joining micro communities. How would you get started on finding, the right ones? I mean, I know, Dale, you mentioned marketing, which is kind of out of the norm, but, how would you get started on kind of identifying some of those?
Yeah, there's tons of them. So LinkedIn's a great place. You'll find people talking about communities all over the place. A couple that I'm part of, Rev Genius, one that I mentioned earlier. There's Dale Dupree runs the Sales Rebellion. They have their own community. Bravado has their own community. So there's a lot of them out there. I think what you have to figure out in these micro communities is which one fits you the best. They're not all equal. Some are pay to play, some are free. What I try to find out, like I just spoke with the Bravado guys a couple of days ago. Actually, they sent me a swag box, and so we had a VP of sales conversation. Once again, sending lumpy mail, brought me into having a conversation with them. And I just found it was good engagement, good communication. So when I'm in these communities, what I'm trying to find is where I'm going to get engagement, where I can not only provide value, but also gain value. So like something like a Rev Genius, like I help them build out their mentorship program. So inside the community, you can go in the community and sign up for their mentorship program and get mentored by people. So there's things that are of value in these micro communities for your sales teams. And all of my sales teams, I like push them into trying these communities. It's up to them to engage, but you got to try it.
Yeah, I almost feel like if we just focus on sales communities, we're missing out a little bit, right? I even talk to people that only read sales books. Well, you have to expand your horizon a little bit. I tell people to read things about people that actually founded companies, good to great, all that stuff. So I think sometimes we need to kind of expand, beyond where we are.
Yeah, I think too, I mean, there's obviously the communities of our peers that we're involved in. So if it's a sales community, if it's on business development side of things, right? There's plenty of communities there, but there's also these communities of who are the personas that you sell into. And so, for Krista, I would say, look for both opportunities there, right? For you, for your sales team, for the industry, for the product, right? What communities can you get involved in there? But also, again, like, who are you reaching out to? What are they doing now? What conversations are they having? What does their community look like? I mean, we talk about events all the time. Events were shut down last year, but that community still found a way to meet, to interact. And so if you have people selling into that community, it's important to know what's going on, what does it look like, and how do you engage with them, right? So you can have those conversations, meet those people, get those introductions.
Yeah, and I would just add, I wouldn't discredit, I know I'm probably on the other side of the spectrum of who I'm selling to, but even in previous roles, geography does play a big part too. So whether it's, the statewide restaurant organization, or it's the statewide digital marketers group, or, kind of looking, because people do business with people they know, right? So if you're local, that's a good end to say, you have some common ground to relate to them on. So I would definitely look at some of those geographic groups for us as well. Like there's some social media groups on Facebook for like pizzeria owners, or again, restaurant marketers, people that sell anything to your client. You could also be a good referral source for each other. And there's no conflict because you're not selling the same thing. So it's forming those affiliate relationships and partnerships, even if it's just, now taking someone to lunch. You can just kind of form your own kind of connection and networks as well.
Yeah, Krista, one fun place to start, but it can get R-rated a little bit, is Thursday night sales. Like everyone's engaged, everyone's there. It's kind of fun. Like Scott Lees and Amy Willis, like they kill it there, and they have a lot of great tips. But it's more fun, and it's not like so like in the engagement. The engagement's happening in real time. So if you wanted to start somewhere, I may start there.
Yeah, I love Thursday night sales, as well as, and this is a free one because there are a lot that are very expensive to join. But Modern Sales Pros, MSP, and you can get nitty gritty in that. If you have a sales question, there are going to be people who you would pay a lot of money to answer them otherwise are going to answer them for free. Some of the best sales minds are a part of that. They also have a whole spreadsheet for networking. So if you are having a specific question about, it could be, I mean, really anything about personas, there's going to be somebody on their networking spreadsheet who says, I specialize in, creating personas in this industry and all these things. So I highly recommend Modern Sales Pros, and they do also have free in-depth workshops, both virtually now, but pre-pandemic, they had a lot of stuff virtually too, and a lot of cities, and I knew that they were expanding, and they're free. So that's nice if you work for a small startup who can't always afford to pay for stuff for you. So I would recommend that wholeheartedly.
That's great advice. Yeah, thank you for that. So next question. I think so often salespeople overlook, we talk about the basics, right? I think just sometimes we focus too much on one thing and think that's going to drive our sales. What's that one thing that you think salespeople often overlook that is a tried and true method of getting, more sales? For me, I have a list. I go down like, I want to talk to existing customers. I want to get referrals. I mean, all those things. Help me understand from your perspective what that maybe one thing could be. I know there are others, but what's one that really drives it?
I think closing is really tough for salespeople, and that includes asking for the business. We do win-loss reviews for every single close that we have. And something I think that people underestimate is that genuinely what we hear is that you told us you wanted to work with us. You asked us to work with you. And we didn't hear that from anybody else. So I think that that's really, really important. And then there's 3 closing questions that I ask my salespeople to ask in really every meeting. And it's kind of high level, but it's at the end, you can recap and say, okay, do I understand everything about your world, whatever that might be, in relating to your product or whatever you're selling. And then if it really gives them an opportunity to overcome any objections at the end. And then if we can overcome those, then do you believe that this can help you? Are you looking to buy this? And then are you looking to buy this from me, essentially? And that's high level, and you can adapt those to you. But it's a way to try and uncover any lingering things that they may not have shared with you previously, that hopefully you can overcome then. And then always next step, date and time. Get that next call on the calendar.
There's such a power in 3, right? 3 is like a magic number in sales, right? Yeah, that's awesome. Who else wants to chime in on that?
I'll chime in. I think going along with that, to be most successful, I think you have to map the buying process to your sales process. I think too many times salespeople are trying, and once again, it goes back to leadership. You're trying to push your sales process instead of aligning the buying process. So the buyer has all the power. I actually don't think there's really a sales process. You need one internally, but externally, there's a buying process. Many times, as I was trying to tell people inside of my organization a little bit, people buy our product every 4 or 5 years, or they refresh their intranet every 4 or 5 years. So they're only buying every 4 or 5 years. We're selling every day. So we forget that we sell and they buy. And so if you put yourself in their shoes, they probably don't really know what their buying process looks like. So if you can map their buying process or help them understand their buying process, then you're going to be much more successful, because you're going to find out much earlier in the process that their buying process isn't going to align, or they don't know, or it's going to take a lot longer. Going back to an earlier conversation about, working backwards, I implement something called a joint engagement plan, which is owned by both me and the customer. And it's a series of steps that we got to get to actually, I go past contract signature to value. When are you going to see value? Most likely when you're live. So if you work backward from going live, you actually can get a bunch of series of steps on everything they need. And then if they miss something that is their responsibility, then you can kind of push out the timelines. So that's what I say, map the buying process.
I think that's so powerful, especially if you're in more complex and enterprise sales. I think that's so crucial. And I think a lot of salespeople, overlook that important step.
Yeah, I would say to go along with that, Dale, one thing that I feel like a lot of salespeople skip over is just aligning on the goals. So in the sales process, if we don't agree on what are your metrics for success, then we haven't finished our sales process. Because at the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is churn and burn through these leads, right? You do all this work on the front end to get the sale closed, but they're looking at X and Y, and you're showing them review results from A and B. And so there's a disconnect there, and that's the fastest way to lose that business. So I think definitely from the beginning, just aligning on, those metrics for success is also crucially important.
And for me, I'll add, you guys saw my head nodding to each of the things that you guys said. I think one of the things that we really encourage here, and we see a lot, it's maybe, we're trying to solve for the symptoms, and we're not necessarily going deep enough to understand what is the true problem that we're solving for. And so I think constantly when we're talking about deals, when we're doing our discovery, right, when we're setting next steps, when we're getting, mutual buy-in from the customer, if we're talking still more along the symptoms, it's going to be slow. We're not going to get the buy-in. They're not going to be able to sell internally. And so it's something that is constant for us here, is to really understand what's below that, get the customer to really convey that and acknowledge that it's like, yes, okay, here's actually the problem. And then again, if we have a way to solve that, right, be tenacious there. And like, I think Katie, you mentioned it too. It's like, hey, like you said, like you brought us in to work with you, right? So what's changed since then, right? And helping them again reiterate that there is still a problem. And we lose a lot of deals. We talk about it here. It's like we may lose 25% to our competition, but 50% of the deals that we don't win are inaction, right? Status quo. And so it's not always that we're competing against somebody else who's in our space. Most of the time we're competing against them just not taking action at all, right? And so again, if we understand the problem, then we can be much more successful there.
Dan, you just brought up something it sparked an idea in my head. Like, I don't think salespeople ask hard questions because they're afraid like their pipeline's going to dry up, or like if they ask it, then and I think that's a big problem. So I think if we ask better questions as sales executives, we'll get better answers. And so don't be afraid to get a bad or what you consider a bad response, because it may just be a different path you have to take. And I think so many salespeople, when I coach or go through pipeline, they're afraid to ask a hard question.
Yeah, I think it goes to mindset for sure. Like, just having confidence in yourself. And I always say, go big in sales. When I had my first sales job, I was like selling individual life insurance policies. And I was like, there's got to be more to it than this, right? So I started targeting doctors, and then I went to the hospital and I started selling group policies. So, you build that confidence over time, and you start to go big. And I think it all comes down to confidence and mindset. I know, Sharm, you were going to say something. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That was Katie, I think.
Was it Katie?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I wholeheartedly agree with, obviously everything that everybody said today here on every topic. But definitely people don't want to lose, right? Salespeople do not want to lose. We're very competitive. So to insulate themselves from that, they are not going to ask the hard questions, but then your deals are going to stall, exactly what Dan's saying. So one of the things at Career Minds that is very important to our sales cycle, because they can be very long, from the time that you first meet with somebody, by the time that they get a demo, get their RFP out. It could be 3 to 4 years. I'm getting meetings with people that I talked to nine years ago when I started at Career Minds. So it can be very, very long. So TBT, hashtag TBT. That's not, I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but at Career Minds, that's touch between the touch. And so that's very, very important. And it's not, hey, I'm checking in because, you should have an answer by now. It's the guided selling piece that we're talking about. It's building value. What can I share with you along this way? We're already engaged in this, but what can I share that will remind you that I'm here, but also build value and showing that we are the companies that you are meant to work with, hopefully. So that's a really big thing, is how can we get creative with our touch between the touch as well?
Well, for a lot of salespeople, 9 years would be like, I'm in the wrong business. That's a long time. But yeah, I mean, patience is part of it, the long game for certain products and services. Absolutely. Well, I know we got a few more minutes here, and I really appreciate all of the great tips and strategies that you guys have shared so far. I've got a couple more questions, and I think, the pandemic has really forced us to think about things not only professionally but personally. But I always like to say, each event like this teaches us something, and I wonder, what was the biggest surprise that you experienced over the last 16 months in your business that you weren't expecting? That's going to make you think. I hear pins and needles.
I think for the biggest change that's happening right now is just that sales, like everything is changing. Like that's the biggest thing. Like we're in a place now that if you don't change or be ready to change on a daily basis, like you're going to be extinct. Like if you're not social selling, if you're not using all the channels, then you're just missing out on huge things. So I think it just makes us, like, the only consistency in life is change. Like that's the only thing that's always going to happen. And so if as individuals you don't have that mindset, or you're like, oh, I don't want change, or change is scary, then like you're not going to be successful. First of all, you're not going to be successful in sales. And I think the other thing that I realized over this whole thing is not, I've always known this, but not everybody is good at sales, or not everybody should be in sales. Like sales is a full contact sport, and it's not for everybody. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just a reality. And so, find what is best for you and what you do best, and go for that.
What other surprises did we find out the last 16 months? I'm sure there's something out there.
For me, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a surprise, but I think it's just, realizing again just how resilient we are as humans, and the sales community, how important that sales community is to come together, to share best practices, to talk through, hey, what are you experiencing? Here's what we're experiencing. Here's what we tried, right? And so, like, again, is it a shock? No. But I hadn't seen it the way it was the last, 18 months or so. And so I think, as sellers, we're in unique roles. Our team, right? We have individual quotas, right, that we're responsible for. And so you're a part of a team, but ultimately you have contributions that you need to be making. And sometimes we feel isolated, and that we're on an island, and that we don't have everyone around us, right? And so I think, again, just realizing that there's a lot of people that are willing to go out of their way to help you and create a pay it forward type, community, for lack of a better word, right? Where we can all, benefit from each other and help share things that are working, right? So that's what comes to mind for me.
I think the only thing that I could say, because again, nothing really surprised me, I'm with Dale on the change is always constant here. It's just how important it is to make sure that you're not losing sight of investing in yourself. And that's something that I push for my reps too. I think it just surprised me how fast we move, and how often we're just going through the day-to-day. And then you look up and you're like, I haven't done anything professionally developing, like, for myself in 6 months, 3 months, 4 months. And so you, leading by example, need to make sure that you're slowing down enough to make sure those deposits are being made, as well as in your team. And again, I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but it's just how quickly the time goes by, and you just kind of look up. And so it's just important to keep the regular cadence and regimen, and whether it's once a quarter or whatever that structure is, just to make sure that it's more solidified for you and for your team, so that you're constantly elevating the bar.
That was awesome. Yeah.
It can be really hard to make those commitments and keep those commitments to yourself, leading other people, when we pour ourselves into the success of other people. It can be really tough. And I think that the pandemic, it was even though we were doing well, it was a tough year, maybe mentally I guess, for a lot of people and a lot of salespeople who were either getting laid off or being so busy, because it was feast or famine, I feel like, for a lot of people. So find your tribe, find the people who are there to support you, who you can talk through with things, whether it's a coworker or somebody that you've networked with. And I agree, Sharm, slow down. Like, it's okay to take time to do things right. And remember that, you're there too. And you have to invest in yourself before you can really invest in other people. I agree.
Well, such great feedback. We've reached the hour, and I really appreciate all the ideas, tips, tricks, strategies from our speakers today. And I hope to do more of these in the future. This is the last day of the 5MX Sales Summit. This is a recorded stream, so it will be available to all who are listening and all that registered for the event. So again, I want to thank you again, guys.
Thank you.
It's fun. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you down the road.
All right. Take care.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.